A traditional punch in pro wrestling is not supposed to make contact. Naturally, if the punches executed by wrestlers do indeed make contact, they would be constantly injured and most of them would be knocked out within minutes each time they wrestled, not to mention the amount of ice packs you'd need for bruised eyes backstage. But despite this, on several occasions, a wrestler has actually been punched in the face. Mistakes happen, but a punch to the face by a wrestler is going to have severe consequences. On many occasions, it's just a case of an accident, but on some occasions, the wrestlers actually meant it. With that being said, here are 7 WWE wrestlers who got punched for real in the ring. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Number 1. Ken Shamrock punches Vader. Former UFC fighter Ken Shamrock would make his WWE debut in 1997, and for his debut match on pay-per-view, he would wrestle Vader in an all-holds-barred match. Now, Vader was notorious for being stiff in the ring, therefore fans expected an extremely physical match between the two, and that's certainly what they received. Shamrock admitted that he wasn't too sure of how to work a WWE-style match just yet, and this showed moments into the match. Shamrock started punching Vader with hard physical blows, which broke Vader's nose in the process. You can actually hear Vader telling Shamrock to ease up when you watch the match back. Vader would get so fed up with Shamrock's stiff shots that he would retaliate with a stiff lariat, which seemed to knock some sense into the future Intercontinental Champion as the match went smoothly from that point onwards. Vader's nose, however, would be broken in 4 places, and Vader even had trouble walking after the match with Shamrock. Hey, they didn't call him the world's most dangerous man at the time for nothing. The issues between Shamrock and Vader are very rare, as it was just believed to be Shamrock being overexcited to be making his WWE debut and pretty much got carried away in the moment. However, Shamrock certainly learned a valuable lesson on that day in 1997. Number 2. Hardcore Holly punches RENEE DUPREE. There are numerous accounts of Hardcore Holly being a notorious bully backstage during his time in the WWE. There was obviously that time on Tough Enough where he legitimately beat up Tough Enough competitor Matt Cappotelli, but in Holly's word he was teaching him a lesson. But there isn't a better example of Holly's documented bullying than during a house match in November 2004. The house match in question was between Hardcore Holly and Charlie Haas teaming together to face RENEE DUPREE and Kenzo Suzuki. Don't remember that team? Well, they were actually tag team champions at one point. Yeah, who remembers that? The story goes that halfway through the match, Holly started shooting on DUPREE with legit punches, which resulted in DUPREE having black eyes and multiple bruises on the face from the beating. The reason for this was that Holly had allowed DUPREE to borrow his rental car, but DUPREE ended up receiving a parking ticket which he didn't even pay for, which in turn impacted Holly's insurance. Sparky therefore thought it was appropriate to take his anger out on DUPREE in the ring. Holly was fined $10,000 for the incident and would have likely been instantly fired if it wasn't for his long tenure in the company. However, if this happened today, the guilty party would have no doubt been fired, no matter what their status was within the company. Well, unless you're Brock Lesnar. Number 3. Brock Lesnar punches Braun Strowman. The 2018 Royal Rumble was special for many reasons. It was the first event to feature 2 Royal Rumble matches, as the WWE debuted the women's version of the legendary match, but it was also the night that Brock Lesnar stiffed Braun Strowman in a match. In a match for Lesnar's Universal title, which also featured Kane, Braun would catch Lesnar with a stiff knee. Lesnar got to his feet and punched Braun right in the head and told him to slow the F down. Naturally, as you would, Braun obliged and he was never stiff with Lesnar again. Strowman would later reveal that it was mainly nerves that made him accidentally hit Lesnar with the stiff knee. Surprisingly, there were no issues between the two men backstage after the match. Braun revealed that they both apologized to each other, as it was clearly Braun just getting overexcited and there was no malicious intent involved on the side of Braun. Number 4. Chris Jericho punches Shawn Michaels' wife. Okay, we get that Shawn Michaels' wife is not a wrestler, but she was still in the ring and this was indeed an accident. Now, back in 2008, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels engaged in one of the best feuds of all time. The feud would last for around 6 months and was taken to the next level at SummerSlam with the involvement of Shawn Michaels' wife, Rebecca Hickenbottom. Yes, we love Shawn Michaels' real last name. In a segment where HBK was going to retire due to injuries sustained in the feud with Jericho, Jericho would interrupt HBK and his wife before throwing a punch at the Heartbreak Kid. However, HBK would duck and the punch would land and hit HBK's wife instead. Unfortunately, the timing was off, meaning Jericho actually legitimately hit her. Naturally, HBK was furious once they got backstage, both at Jericho for hitting his wife, but also at himself for allowing his wife Rebecca to get involved in an angle which would require her to get physical. As HBK and Jericho were arguing backstage, Rebecca stood up and said to Jericho, "Is that the best you've got?" which broke up the tension between HBK and Y2J. Jericho would continue to apologize in the days and weeks to come and even sent flowers to Rebecca. The punch actually took the angle to new heights due to the real-life implications that the story had created. HBK and Jericho would go on to have many more classic matches in the WWE, including a ladder match for the world title at 2008 No Mercy pay-per-view. Number 5. Nia Jax punches Becky Lynch. Nia Jax has an established reputation for being reckless and careless in the ring with her opponents. Now, this reputation all started during a segment on Raw in 2018, which featured the women of the SmackDown roster invading Raw and taking out the women on the Raw roster. In the segment, Nia Jax would legitimately punch Becky Lynch in the face, which caused Becky to have her nose broken and even suffer a concussion due to how hard Nia threw the punch. Fan outrage was prominent on social media, as fans were questioning why Nia was throwing a worked punch with so much force that it would actually break someone's nose. Fan outrage was also prominent because the injury meant Becky would miss out on the biggest match of her career at the time against Ronda Rousey at the Survivor Series pay-per-view. Nia turned into one of the most hated women on the roster following the incident, and naturally WWE turned this into a character for her, as she would actively make references to breaking Becky's nose during her entrance and throughout her in-ring work. Despite the unfortunate nature of Becky having her nose broken, in the long run it did make her even more endearing and popular with the audience, which is at least something positive that came from an incident that was reckless and frankly should not have happened. Number 6. JBL punches the Blue Meanie. The 2005 ECW One Night Stand pay-per-view was supposed to be a celebration of the ECW brand, the performers and the fans who passionately followed the product. Despite this intention, the pay-per-view is most well known for an incident between two wrestlers, JBL and the Blue Meanie. In a segment on the pay-per-view, some WWE talent including Kurt Angle and JBL started brawling with ECW talent in the ring. During the brawl, JBL legitimately started to punch the Blue Meanie so hard that the Blue Meanie was busted open severely. It was so bad that WWE agents yelled at Meanie as they assumed he bladed and he wasn't actually cut open naturally. The issues between the two apparently stemmed from Meanie stating that he wasn't a fan of JBL and his antics backstage during Meanie's initial WWE run. WWE obviously capitalized on the angle by booking the two in a match on SmackDown, the one where Stevie Richards absolutely clapped JBL on the head with one of the hardest chair shots in the history of wrestling. Richards himself would admit that was payback for the one night stand incident. Meanie did consider suing regarding the incident at the pay-per-view, but was talked out of it after being offered a new contract. The positive news is that both men made up around a decade later. Meanie even admitted that he would class them as friends. JBL even pitched Meanie being in the 2015 Royal Rumble to WWE officials in order to promote the new ECW DVD. This is one of those stories where time can certainly heal old wounds. And number 7, Floyd Mayweather punches the Big Show. The Big Show would take nearly a year off after his run as ECW champion at the end of 2006 to heal up injuries and rekindle his passion for wrestling. He would then return at the 2008 No Way Out pay-per-view, and he would return as a heel and target Rey Mysterio before boxing champion Floyd Mayweather would put a stop to Show taking out Mysterio. The exchange between Mayweather and Show was planned to be a segment that set up Mayweather vs. Show for Wrestlemania 24, and the segment even went better than expected due to the rather interesting element. Big Show told Mayweather that he needed to punch him so hard that Show would break his nose for real, and that it would result in the fans being fully invested ahead of their WrestleMania match. Big Show was absolutely right in his logic, as the broken nose got a huge reaction, and the mainstream attention the segment and match received resulted in WrestleMania 24 being one of the most successful WWE pay-per-views of all time. But there you have it guys, 7 WWE wrestlers and HBK's wife who got punched for real in the ring. Be sure to leave your comments down below, subscribe if you haven't already, follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.